we're all a real person and we're all flawed, and that's okay.
I had no goals for my life.
I had 4 children in 3.5 years.
I do not know how I would do it without them. We're a team.
Looking in the mirror and just not knowing who I was.
We do. We cry, but we laugh a lot. Those are high stress moments.
It's never the content that we teach. It's always the relationship.
Getting sober and living this life of freedom.
I feel like even in the chaos, I have to believe that they also see all the really good. Those moments keep me going. Sorry.
Hey everybody, I have to say I love that piece that our creative team put together, and I look forward to explaining exactly what that's all about here in just a few moments. But before I do that, I want to wish all of you a very, very happy Easter. Those of you in the great city of Henderson, Kentucky, you got a new wall there today. It's kind of a cool thing. On the west side of Evansville, hope you have a fantastic Easter. Those on the east side have been rowdy today, and that's always kind of cool. And then apparently we have a 4th site in the lobby of our east side campus. So those of you that are out there, I don't think they expected to do that, but we're trying to get them out there. So we're thinking of you. Anyway, happy Easter to all of you. But let me say this about Easter after wishing you a happy Easter. There's a problem with Easter, okay? There is a problem, and I'm going to share what that is. And now before I do, I want to go on record as I'm a big fan of Easter, okay? I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with it. I'm a big fan. If I could pick any topic from the Bible and I was confined to one topic that I'd study for the rest of my life, I would absolutely choose the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, because I think it's the most impactful, wide-reaching, most amazing thing in all of life. I would choose that one. So I love what Easter stands for. I love all the trappings that go with Easter. It's warm weather outside. The kids are dressed up real nice. There's flowers everywhere. And the people at the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup Company came up with the brilliant idea of Easter egg Reese cups. That's like the greatest thing there is. Yes, absolutely. So I love Easter. I need to go on record as saying that. But here's the problem, and we do have a problem that we need to talk about a little bit later with the terrible news that came out of Sri Lanka today. I'm not talking about that problem just yet. But this is the problem. I think most people are kind of familiar with the basic outline of what Easter is really all about. The problem is it's recorded in the Bible, and the Bible not only took place a distant time ago, 2,000 years ago, but a distant world ago. If you've ever watched the movies that are based upon Bible times, it's a different world than we're living in. People are wearing robes. They got the sandals on. It seems like there's an overabundance of sheep running around everywhere. They're just kind of there in the shots all the time. There's a lot of sheep. And we don't have that kind of world at all. Now, the other problem is that that's the past. And if you could extract any meaning from the resurrection, it seems like it's all in the future. And it's the future that we would all prefer to put way off, because most of the application of it has to do with dying and heaven and hell and all those kinds of questions. So the meaning of it seems to be way out there in the future. The million-dollar question is does it have any real and true application for our lives right now? And we're going to argue that it does. And that's why today what we're doing is we're springboarding into a series that we're going to be doing over the next several weeks. Then we invite everybody to come to, because it's dealing with the kinds of things that we all deal with where we are in life right now. Things like relationships. Relationships is like the core of life. And you and I both know that the greatest thing in life oftentimes can be, there's nothing better than a relationship that's got great chemistry, is working well, all the things are, all cylinders are firing, right? They're just, that's a great, great thing. Now, conversely, we also know that few things are worse than relationship breakdown, if you've ever had that happen to you before. Addictions. We're going to talk about addictions. Now, as soon as I say addictions, I'm sure some of you are like, well, that counts me out, I'm all good. I think there's a couple answers to that. You may be the person that's like thinking, I can quit anytime I want. I'm not addicted to anything. And the people in your life are really going, yeah, no, you are. Okay, you could be that person. Or maybe you don't have any problems with addictions. But I can almost promise you that you have someone in your life who is. And we're not just talking about addictions to drugs or alcohol, though we certainly will. But there's addictions to pornography, gambling, food, video games. We are a very addictive culture. That's just a part of who we are and the part of the things that we face. And then finally, we're going to talk about stress. Anybody stressed? Did you know that our generation, this time in life right now, think about this, is the most fast-paced, information overloaded generation in the history of the human race? I get stressed just saying that. I mean, think about that. You're getting more information poured into your brain per day than any other generation that's ever lived in the history of the world. So yes, stress, and stress can lead to depression and all those things. And what we're going to see, and we're going to start today, is how the resurrection can be applied to these things. And we'll be sharing some today and then some in the weeks to come. Now here's where it starts. We're going to go to a resurrection story in the Bible. The Bible takes very different angles on, in different places on the resurrection. My personal favorite is found in Luke chapter 24. And we're going to read through that. And your assignment, wherever you are at any campuses, is to pay attention to the details. I'm just going to be going through this. Pay attention to details because we're going to be kind of going back and looking at these things here in just a moment, kind of unpacking them. Listen to what it says. While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." Talking about what? Well, the problem is, think about this for a second, is that Jesus was not only their friend. They had been with him for 3 years, men and women. They were in this room. They were talking about him. And if you've ever experienced the loss of a friend, you know that can be one of the most hurtful things in life. But not only that, there's a group of people in a room that had lost their leader. They had all kinds of hopes, all kinds of dreams, all kinds of plans that said, our future is going to look a certain way. And overnight, after they watched him brutally murdered by the Roman government, all their dreams are dashed. So you're not only talking grief, you're talking disillusionment. But the rumor was going around that Jesus was appearing to different people. So they were talking about this. It says, while they were still talking about this, Jesus himself appeared among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." It's a good thing. They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, and I love this question, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds?" Now, I don't ever want to be smart alecky towards Jesus, but in the back of my mind, why am I troubled? Because, you were dead, and now you appeared right there. I think we'd all be a little bit troubled, don't you think? But I would never say anything like that, of course. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? Look at my hands and my feet. It's I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost doesn't have flesh and bones as you see I have." And when he said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, and I love this question, "Do you have anything here to eat?" You would think there'd be more important topics to talk about, You were dead, now you're alive. They're all standing around freaking out, and he says, "You got anything to eat?" That's just priceless. I love that. So they gave him a piece of broiled fish. He took it and ate it in their presence. He said to them, "This is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." Now, if you're a Jew, which all of them were, that was code for the Old Testament part of the Bible. Everything that the Old Testament part of the Bible for centuries that they have been used to is fulfilled in me. So he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures. He told them, this is what is written. He gives them cliff notes on what the Bible's really all about. The Messiah will suffer and rise again from the dead on the third day, and repentance for the forgiveness of sins will be preached in his name to all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things, and I'm going to send you what my Father has promised, but stay in the city until you have been clothed with power from on high. Now let me give you my premise for the day on all this. If that story that we just read, in its details, Jesus rising again from the dead, Jesus explaining that, are true. I mean real, they're not mythological, if they're not fairy tale. If this is an actual event from history, it has massive implications for our daily lives. I love what one scholar who goes around to different college campuses, has done it for years. His name is Josh McDowell, talks about these things. He was an enemy of the Christian faith, didn't like it originally. He wanted to study the resurrection to see whether or not it happened and prove that it didn't, but he ended up proving that it did to himself. And he said this, quote, "After more than 700 hours of studying this subject, I have come to the conclusion that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is either one of the most wicked, vicious, heartless hoaxes ever foisted on the minds of human beings, or it is the most remarkable fact in history. It is the most remarkable fact in history." And what I wanted you to do today, and I know many of you already do believe it, you're good. But I know several of you out there, you're not really into the whole thing of religion or whatever else. You're here to support your family or whatever. I want you just over the next few minutes to entertain the possibility. Just imagine that maybe this really is happening, that the story we just read is real. The thing about it is, I know we say around here all the time, you can bring your brain to church. I have a book that we offer out in our lobbies that this is filled. This book right here, this guy did nothing. This is a dissertation on the historical reasons why people really should believe that the resurrection, that story that we just read, is actual and real. And so what we're going to be doing over the next few moments, I'm just going to give you 3 implications for our daily lives of if it really did happen, it's true, how it impacts us, okay? I'm going to give you 3 of those, and we'll give you some in the weeks to come. The first one's this. Now, the first one, I will admit, is kind of speculative. I'm going to go ahead and give you permission to think, I don't believe that at all. I mean, that was kind of a nice try there, preacher man, but no. But it's just food for thought one, okay? You guys, when you go out to lunch today, you can, did you agree with that? No, I didn't agree with it. I thought that guy was an idiot. You can say all that stuff. It's fine. I'm used to it. No, it's fine. Now, here's the first one. If that story's real in its details, it affirms science. It affirms science. I said that to a friend of mine. He said, I thought you were saying it wrong. He said, see what I mean? Did you see any science in there? Nobody was wearing a lab coat. No one was, had any beakers going on or anything. What in the world? What do you mean it affirms science? Well, hang with me and watch my spellbinding logic, okay? Here it goes. No, seriously, this is kind of an interesting deal. Notice the first part of the story. Notice the theme of the first part of the story. He shows up. And they're from a distant time. They're from a distant place. But they're not a lot different from us. If someone that you knew for a fact was dead just suddenly appeared in your living room, you'd be startled and frightened, right? Abraham Lincoln shows up. Boom, he's there. You wouldn't just go, I think he's resurrected from the dead. Obviously has religious implications. You wouldn't say that. You'd think you saw a ghost, which is exactly what they did. They thought they saw a ghost. Even if you didn't believe in ghosts, you'd think you saw a ghost. And the first part of the story is him talking about how he's not a ghost. He says, see my hands and my feet. Look at me, touch me. Then that's what the broiled fish is so significant. I have this weird little way about me that's my favorite part of all the resurrection stories. That's my favorite little moment when he asks for stuff to eat. He's come back from the dead. He's conquered the grave. Got anything to eat? But just look at Jesus sitting there. He's got his napkin kind of tucked in, kind of gets out of his plate. And they're all freaking out like, what the? And he's just, lemon juice and salt would be great on this. Just wonderful. It's a side salad. Why does this matter? Because it's the emphasis of the day. The emphasis of the day is that there's an empty tomb. Someone literally and physically had died. And now they're literally and physically alive. Now here's why this matters so much. It's because especially in religious context, we think of religion as all about the spiritual. In other words, the things you can't see, there is such a thing as spiritual, we believe, but it's all about the spiritual, non-physical realities. We care about that. But if the story were all about that, it would have been okay for Jesus' body just to remain there and his spirit be alive. And he could appear to them as a ghost. He could have floated out around the room and rattled chains and did all the things that ghosts do. I guess that's what they do. That's what I've seen. Okay, he could have done that. Why not? Why did it matter so much that he was physical? Well, he explains that over his fish while he's eating it. He says, guys, I came to fulfill everything you've been hearing for your whole life. You know what he said the Old Testament, remember that? He gives them the story. Here's why it matters. You know what the story says? One of the cliff notes in the entire story is this, is that first of all, God made the world and physical things good. He made birds and fish and sky and black holes and sheep and all the things that go with reality. He made those things. And the Bible starts off by saying that. But then it says something very important happened. Because of our moral choices, because of our poor connection with him and the evil things that we did, there's this poison that's entered into life. It's called the fall. This past week, we had one of the worst images I've seen in a while. It was just, the burning of Notre Dame. I actually got to visit that place. And you do walk around and they're going, oh, how did they do this? Built 800 years ago. Over a long period of time, they were designing this beautiful Gothic architecture. It just blows your mind. And I was watching it on television, literally burning to the ground. And that was a perfect portrait of the way the Bible presents life. This beautiful, amazing, wonderful thing that's burning and it's on fire. And that's where we see the Sri Lanka thing comes in. I wake up this morning, I'm all geared up for Easter, and the first thing I see is push notifications that says there's a shooting that's gone on and killed 200 some odd people. That's the beautiful world that we have that's burning. But what Jesus tells them, he says, this is the taste. What's happening is, yes, the world is burning, but there's coming a time, the Messiah, that's what it means. There's coming someone who is going to put out the fire and completely rebuild the entire structure. That's why it's so important that he rose again physically from the dead. Because in addition to being spiritual, the world is physical. Now, what's that got to do with science? I'm glad you asked. I looked up science, just a definition on Google, went to a dictionary. Science is this. Here's the definition of science. Science is the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. It's the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. What's such a big deal about that? Jesus affirms the physical there. You know what science is? It's just the study of the good things that God made. I was looking at my son's high school biology text, and they did an article on Francis Bacon, and I thought, because he's the father of the scientific method. He's the one that kind of birthed the whole idea of the experimentation and all that. I decided to get a Francis Bacon book. Francis Bacon's essays. You know what's interesting about Francis Bacon? I'm sure you were wondering that on Easter especially. You know, I was wondering about Francis Bacon. What are we going to get to talk about him? He talks about God all the time. He talks about the things of Christ. He talks about the Bible with his science and the whole deal. If you'll study science, what you'll find is it was birthed out of a lot of these early scientists, Robert Boyle, his father of chemistry, all these guys it was born out of their Christian view that God had affirmed and made the physical thing. Now, what's that got to do with you and I? As we study addictions and study stress and study relationships, there's an immense amount of scientific data out there that can be very, very helpful. I've been immersing myself in this stuff. Why? Because God made you a physical being. You have blood cells, you have hormones running around in you, you have all kinds of physical things happening to you. And I completely reject the war between Christianity and science. Christianity properly understood and science properly understood are joined together, and so we can study those things, and they do have to do with our lives. Second thing, okay, so that gets you over that kind of, go play with that one a little bit. Second thing is this. If that story is real, true, in the explanation, the physical thing, everything else, it affirms not only that science, it affirms that our lives have meaning. Our lives have meaning. Being a pastor it's got a lot of cool qualities to it, but one of the things that's very neat about it is that I've got to be with people in the ups and downs of their lives. I've been to a lot of funeral homes, a lot of hospital rooms, a lot of weddings, a lot of counseling rooms. I say I basically keep people's secrets for a living. You know, that's kind of what I do. And I've seen people all different walks of life and all different times, irreligious people and religious people. Here's something I've heard quoted. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. People say this all the time. I believe everything happens for a purpose. I believe that everything's happened for a purpose. I believe everything happens for a purpose. There's this innate thing in all of us that we have this larger view of life. Heard about a survey that was done worldwide where they asked people from Africa, Asia, to all around the world, do you think about the meaning of your life, the ultimate meaning of your life? 75% of the people surveyed said, yeah, and pretty often too. We think about the meaning in life that we have. Or does my life matter in some grand scheme of things? Am I part of a larger story or am I not? There was a Jewish doctor named Viktor Frankl who spent time in a Nazi concentration camp back in World War II and survived. And he lived to write a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he made an observation about when being in that kind of horrid circumstance. He said, essentially, there were three kinds of people. There were those that just weren't summarily executed out of nowhere, but there were people that just faded away. That their lives had purpose and meaning outside of that camp, with their family, with their profession. But once all that was stripped away, he just watched them fade off, and their life, they would just expire. He said the second group of people were the people that just became for survivalists. They were the ones, I don't care if I have to lie, cheat, steal, betray, I don't care what I have to do, I'm going to live. And I don't care what it costs me. But he said, weirdly, there was this third group of people that in the midst of that hell on earth retained both their kindness and their strength. And listen to his conclusion as to why. These are his words. Quote, the only way for the prisoners' humanity to survive was to relocate the main meaning of their lives to some transcendent reference point, something beyond this life and this world. The only way these people could retain kindness, because all their meaning had been removed, their profession, their family, everything else they got their meaning from. It was a point beyond. Those are the ones. So I think that's what everybody's aching for. Everybody wants to know, am I a part of a bigger story or not? And the resurrection affirms it's absolutely real. If it's true, if Jesus Christ rose again from the dead, your life has meaning. Now here's the problem. You may know that and say, settle down, preacher. I mean, come on. But here's why I bring it, here's why it's so important. I know that most people innately just have that within them. But we have a culture that's shooting the other way. I could give you tons of examples from writers. This is Jerry Coyne. He's a biologist, he's a writer, he's a scientist. He says this, quote, naturalistic philosophy, which he's pushing, would say there is no special purpose for your life. We have no more extrinsic purpose than a squirrel or an armadillo. Happy Easter, everybody. Think about that. Those kinds of statements are everywhere. It's going counter to what I believe everything happens for a purpose. I believe my life has meaning. According to Jesus, he fulfilled this greater story that it really, really is going on. And the death and the burial and the resurrection and the life and who he is calls everybody, invites everybody. You can be in on the greater story. You can have a role in it. You can play in the greater story. Your life has meaning. Let me just be very personal. I never considered myself truly addicted to drugs the way I saw some of my friends were. But I don't want to split hairs. I guess I don't know, but I do know this. I had a pattern in my life that nearly destroyed me several times. And I would try to get away, and I would try to get away, and I would try to get away, and I would always go back. And I would get to the point of suicide, and then I'd get rid of it, and then I'd get fixed up, and then I'd go back. And this cycle over and over and over and over and over again. You know what broke me out of the cycle? It was that thought. It was as if Jesus said to me, I have a purpose for your life, and I'm calling you to live out that purpose. Come, follow me, and I'll show you what your life means. And then my life became not just trying to overcome this bad thing, but pursuing of a good thing. And that's a critical, critical principle. If you want to overcome any addiction or any challenge in life, you've got to have more than just wrestling over the bad thing. Let me give you one more. Implication that if the resurrection is real, I would argue that it affirms science. It affirms that we do have meaning in our lives. But finally, hear me on this. If this story is true, it affirms the availability of God's power. It affirms the availability of God's power. Did you notice how he closed? And since I told you to look for the details, you should remember. He says, okay, I've fulfilled the story that you've heard from the beginning. I want you guys to go out and tell the story. Your witnesses of me coming alive, and we're a result of their witness, by the way. And all over the world, there's the result of their witness. They did a pretty good job. But he said, I don't want you to go out there just with the story. I want you to go out there with power. Now think about power for a second. Harvard Medical School, they did a mind-body medical institute, which is a very interesting medical institute to have. They did a study called the Study of Therapeutic Effects of Intercessory Prayer. Okay, there's a 10-year, $2 million thing out of Harvard where they were intercessory prayer means just praying for other people. And they wanted to see if it's effective. And they divided up cardiac patients into two groups. You get to be prayed for, you don't. And they found at the end of the study, no difference between the two. Which on Easter, to say that, it's kind of a buzzkill. Okay, let's just admit it. No difference, according to them. I want to recommend a book for you. I recommended it a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to recommend it again because it's a fantastic read. Fantastic read. It's called The Case for Miracles. And it's by an investigative reporter who was a Yale grad and all the rest. And he takes on this question of miracles, and he talks about this study that Harvard did because he's like, do miracles happen or don't they? Harvard says they don't. Well, he talks to, by the way, a scholar from Kentucky, right outside of Lexington, so he does one of those. But he also, in one chapter, in response to this, he talks to a professor from Indiana University, all right? So there's some extra credibility in there somehow. Depending on who you are, obviously. Total discredit otherwise, you just apply those things. But her name is Candy Gunther Brown, and she observes the effects of religion in people's lives for a living. And she said she goes in with the assumption, she doesn't decide there's a deity or not a deity. She just, as a scholar, she studies the effect of religion on people's lives. Well, he asked her, he goes to her and he says, what about this Harvard study that says, when people are prayed for, nothing happens? She said, well, it's interesting about that study. She said, if you were sick, and when most people are sick, when they're really sick, they want people praying for them. Even if they don't believe that much, they'll have people pray for them. Who's the kind of person you'd have pray for you? You're going to call the most fanatical, into it person that you can think of, right? Someone who really believes. That grandma that's at church every week, and I pray for me, please. You do that. She said, what's interesting in that Harvard study, they picked a group of people praying for people that really don't even believe in it that much. They were kind of an offshoot group that was not even considered historically Christian Orthodox. They were praying. She quoted him 2 other studies outside of the Harvard one, where the requirements for the prayers were this. This is their requirement. In this study, quote, born-again Protestants and Catholics who believed in a personal God and prayed to Jesus and believed in him as a healer. And she said they recorded in these peer-reviewed studies absolute improvement. That's kind of neat. But here's the real kicker for me. This doctor from IU, she put her team of researchers on a plane and they flew to Mozambique, Africa, because they'd heard miracles were going on there. And they showed up, lab coats, clipboards, the whole deal, and they decided they're going to study miracles because they heard there was a missionary couple there that were praying for people and healings were happening. And they decided they didn't want to see psychological stuff or any of that kind of thing. They picked, we're going to study people who are deaf and get better and people who are blind to get better. And so this research team from IU goes there and just watches, stands aside, and they watched people get prayed for, and they said time and time again, they watched improvement. For instance, there was one old lady, she said, came up, and she could not literally see a hand in front of her face, a foot away. One of the lady missionaries prays for her, and then after that, she could read a book. And then this went on, and they recorded the results in this, and listen to what they said. She said, we had a trained research team, we had statistically significant results, and the validity of the study was evaluated as being scientifically sound by the journal that published it. It's in a peer-reviewed journal that these miracles are happening in Mozambique, Africa. Now, why am I going into all that? Because if the resurrection is real, and that story that we just read is true and actual, it affirms the physical wonders of the world. It affirms your life has meaning. But it affirms that God's power is available. That it really does matter when people pray. Jesus wanted his message to go out with power. And he gave that power to people so they could have that. I don't know what you're wrestling with. I know that relationship breaks, whether with a spouse or a child or a friend or a worker, coworker, it can be one of the most awful things in life, and you can feel tangled up in something that's horrid. I know what it feels like to feel addicted to something that you want to get out of your life, but you can't. Or you're so stressed, you just simply feel like you have no peace at all. I believe science has answers for you, but I also know that you're more than just a physical being walking around. Your life has meaning. You're a part of a greater story. And Jesus has a call on your life to come and do something for him. And you can sense it every day. And he wants to give you peace, but he will do it through giving you his power. So here's how we're going to close up across all 3 campuses. At your seats, there's a card that looks like this. I'd like you to take it out wherever you are. Those at the 4th campus in the lobby at East, everybody. And here's what I'd like to ask you to do. It simply has a place for your name, first name only. We don't want to pry. We're not trying to pry in your business. If you want to put a pseudonym there, you can. But here's the question. If you knew there was a group of people praying for you, and they will be, over the next several weeks, what would you want them praying for? Especially in these categories. If you would want somebody praying for your relationships or your stress or addictions, check one of those. You can check all 3. That's okay. No one's going to throw rocks. If your category's not on there, just put something down there. Maybe I'm struggling with depression or my finances are a mess or whatever, physical healing in my body, whatever the case may be. please write that down because we will be praying for you. And I could say, based on scientific research, that prayer matters, that you're more than just physical, even though you are. That if Jesus really did rise again from the dead and that story's true, then we can see amazing things happen over the next several weeks in the area of relationships, in the area of addictions, in the area of stress, and whatever area is there. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask everybody to stand across all campuses. And the bands are going to come back at each one. And they're going to play a last song that we're going to join in together. And if you'd like prayer for that, and you don't have to do this, no pressure, just bring these up and set them on the stage at your campus. Just place it there. We're going to collect these up. Our staff's going to be praying for them, prayer team and everything else. If you'd like to do that, please do it in an orderly fashion. And if you want to be prayed for right now, today, our prayer team will be near where you put these away. And you can say, hey, would you pray for me right now? You don't have to have that. You can just kind of set it down, go back to your seat, and then finish out the song. And again, happy Easter, everybody.